Have you ever tried to animate smoke, sky or water in your photos in After Effects? It sounds easy? Well, turns out it isn't. You can't just take a block of water, move it from one place to another and expect anything good. That's because in the real world, these things move in an organic way. They are flowing. Animating static pictures in After Effects can be difficult in itself. Creating seamlessly looped photo animations with organic movement in them could be even more so. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to do all of this the easy way by using a toolkit for After Effects called Photomotion. We'll take this beautiful photo and create professionally looking photo animation from it. Let's have a look. What's going on guys, Tom here from Integnity with yet another video about photo animation. Before we jump to After Effects, make sure to check the description section below where you'll find links and other useful information. If you want to learn more about photo animation, After Effects and video in general, hit that red button and subscribe to our channel. Alright, let's do this. Alright, so for this tutorial I'm going to be using Windows Machine, just to show you how it actually works on Windows and how it looks, but of course this looks exactly the same on Mac computers as well. So the first thing you're gonna need is obviously Adobe After Effects. Then the second one is Photomotion. So Photomotion is a toolkit for Adobe After Effects that will help you animate your pictures. If you open up this folder over here, this is how Photomotion looks. So obviously you have some quick start tutorial over here, subtitles there. We don't need them now, so we just double click on this Photomotion X folder. And as you can see, we have multiple projections here. These are called projections because they are intended for different types of photo animation. So for example, we have Glacier, which is amazing for freezing up part of your video and then animating the rest of the video in a seamless loop. Then we have Horizon. Horizon is a professional 3D projection for people who want all of those 3D and advanced features in their photo animations. Then we have Mirage. Mirage is the one that we're going to be focusing on today, so wait for that. Then we have Parallax. Parallax is amazing for creating these simple animations with using parallax effect. And then we have Portrait. Portrait is a professional projection for animating faces. So, as I said, today we're going to be focusing on Mirage. Mirage is amazing for all those things where you want to animate something that is organic, or at least have organic movement in the picture. So there could be things like water or smoke or skies and things of that nature, where basically you can't just take part of your image and move it from one place to another. You actually need to think about how would that kind of organic thing move in real life. So Mirage is perfect for that. But let's have a look what we're going to be animating today. We have this picture, beautiful, beautiful picture from Unsplash. I'm going to put a link down into the description section so you can download it and follow along with me. So why is this picture perfect for animating in Photomotion Mirage? Well, it is because as you can see down there, we have this beautiful waterfall. We have some water over there as well. So what we'll try to do in this video tutorial is going to be actually in two parts. First one is going to be just focusing on this waterfall. We're going to animate that. We're going to create that seamless loop from it. But in the second part, I'm going to show you more advanced things. When we're gonna animate this water over here, we're gonna put this person into a separate mask and we're gonna add a little bit of movement to it by using our hidden feature in Photomotion Mirage. So let's have a look. Back over in this folder in Photomotion, let's just double click on Mirage. And you might be wondering, where is the installation file for this? Well, there isn't any, and that's for a good reason, because Photomotion is a fully portable application. So the whole interface and all of these assets that we use for animating your pictures, all of them are automatically loaded into your After Effects as you work on it. So now the second thing, obviously you have 4 of them here. These 3 are basically for previous versions of After Effects. So if you are still running on previous versions such as CC 2015 or CC 2017 or 18, you should use one of these files. Otherwise, if you are running on the latest one, all you have to do is double click on this. That will open After Effects for you. As I said, there's no installation involved or anything like that. So the whole interface, all of those assets, all the buttons and all of those things will be loaded directly into After Effects, into your viewport. So this is how Photomotion Mirage looks inside of After Effects. So if you never opened After Effects before, I'm just gonna quickly show you what's what. And down here you have your timeline. Over there on this right side, you have a couple of options such as modifying your text and other useful panels over there. On this left side, you have your project window, so you import all of your images into this section. And obviously the biggest section over there, largest one, is your viewport. So your viewport is really useful because it actually shows you what you're working on, and Photomotion is actually viewport based application. So what that means is that all of those buttons are loaded directly inside of your viewport. So there's no additional panel where you need to look at, nothing like that. All works directly inside of your viewport. So let's start with Photomotion Mirage. All you have to do is go over here and make sure you are inside of this selection tool. Then we're gonna double click on this button. It's important that you notice the difference in Photomotion. When you see blue button, that means double click. When you see other colors, that usually means just single click, but I'm gonna explain that a little bit later. So let's just double click on this button. This opened a new composition. This is called composition. As you can see down here, all of your compositions are still down there. So if you close this one, it will bring you back to the original one, and you reopen it by double clicking on this button again. So as you can see, we have a few buttons here. What we need to do first, obviously, is start with the button that is most visible, obviously, and that's Add Photo. Just double click on that button, and we need to import our original photo here, that photo that I showed you at the beginning. So we're gonna do that by going over to File, Import, File, and import that file like this. So now that file is inside of After Effects, but we need to bring it into Photomotion, and we're gonna do that by dragging it from here over there and releasing just like that. Now you can see that photo is inside of your viewport, but obviously it is way too big. So we need to scale this photo down, and there's a special way of doing this, but it's not that difficult. All we have to do is just click and drag this thing over there and drag it here to this top layer and release. That's gonna connect your bottom layer to your first layer. So now you can use all of these controls such as position, scale, and rotation. All we need to do is, well, scale it down a little bit. So let's do something like, I don't know, something like this looks fine to me. Don't worry about these transparent pixels on those sides. I'll show you how to get rid of them in a second. Nothing else we need to do in this composition, so we can close it by clicking on this close button. That will bring us back to this original dashboard composition, and if you paid attention, a new button appeared over here called Set Mask. So that's what we're gonna do. Double click on this. That's going to open a new composition again. Now you have two options here. You can either import your mask from Photoshop, let's say, or you can actually draw your mask. So that's what we're going to do. Just double click on this button and we can start drawing our mask. Well, you might be wondering where that mask is actually drawn. Well, it should be drawn around those areas that you want to animate. So let's do that. Just single click on this layer down there. It's very important that that layer is selected. And then you go over here to your pen tool, click on it, and we can start masking around these waterfalls. Nothing fancy here. We're just creating a simple mask, something like this. It's absolutely fine. We don't need to be super precise here because we can tweak those things later on anyway. And there you go. So this is your initial mask. So those parts that we masked now are going to be those that are actually going to be animated. But as you can see, it looks a bit sharp, I would say. So we need to blur it a little bit. And you do that by going over here, single click on this layer and hit F on your keyboard. That's going to show you mask feather. And all you have to do is just drag this and give it a little bit of feather. You don't need to push this too much. So let's say you're gonna add just, I don't know, 10 pixels. That sounds good. Looks good as well. So we can now close this composition, and now we are back into this Add Mask dashboard. Close this one as well. Okay, so now we are back inside of this main dashboard composition, but one very important thing is to switch back to this selection tool. Otherwise you would be creating these pen tool shapes everywhere. So just go over here, single click on that selection tool, And now we're just gonna double click on this animate button. As you can see, all of these buttons are inside of this section required steps. So we need to complete them before we can export our animation. So double click on this animate button, and that's going to open a new composition as usual, and you can see a few buttons here. As you remember, I told you like buttons in Photomotion are color coded. So what that means is that when you see button that is blue, that usually means you should double click on it. If you see button that is gray, that means single click. So that's what we're going to do. Again, make sure you are inside of that selection tool, otherwise you won't be able to do this. And single click on this animate button, and that's gonna actually select the whole composition for you, and that's fine, that's what we need. Now you have two options here. You can either use built-in puppet tool inside of After Effects, or you can use liquify tool that we prepared for you. For this specific purpose, we're gonna be using liquify, and that's purely because it gives you more control over your animation compared to puppet tool. Now you might be wondering, well, where can I find that liquify tool? And it's actually hidden. You probably don't see that panel yet, and all you have to do is just go to Window and enable Effect Controls. That's gonna open a new panel over here. It is next to your project panel. All we need to do here is just enable that liquify tool by single clicking on this checkbox. That's gonna give you this notification over there. It is slower, yes, it is slower than puppet tool, but it gives you more control. That's fine for this purpose, it's not gonna be that slow. So single click on this button over there, that's gonna give you a brush. This brush can be used to animate your image. Now, very important thing is that when we go down here into our timeline, you can see we have this timeline marker, and this actually needs to be positioned somewhere where you would want your animation to stop. So your animation usually begins from frame number 0 or time 0, and it goes and goes and goes, and it stops in a certain frame. So let's say for this animation, we want our animation to be from frame 0 to frame 50. Now, you probably don't see these frames over here, and that's fine because you probably see time code just like that. All you have to do is just hold down Control and single click on it. That's gonna switch it to frames just like that. So what we need to do now, let's say that animation needs to be 50 frames long. Let's type 50, hit enter, and that's gonna move that timeline head to frame number 50. All we need to do now is just start animating. So make sure we are in this tool, in liquify panel. You can set up your brush size by modifying these numbers, and your brush pressure is over there. So let's start animating. All I'm doing here is just dragging this waterfall down there. That's gonna create that illusion that this is actually flowing. Don't worry if you go over this person over there. I'm gonna show you how you can restore this. We're gonna add a little bit of splash here, just like that. It's fine, we're gonna do that for the second waterfall as well. If you go down here and click on this layer again and hit U on your keyboard, that's gonna show you your keyframe. This is called keyframe, and you have two of them here. This is your initial keyframe, this is your starting point of your animation, and that animation just plays from there to there like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, there is one thing we need to fix before we go ahead, and that's this section over here. As you can see, our waterfall is kind of going in front of this person standing there, so we need to fix that somehow. First thing you need to do is just make sure your timeline, your time head is on frame 50, where is your last keyframe. Just like this, hold down Shift, that's going to snap to that position. And what we need to do now is click on this button here and restore this area around his head. Something like this is perfectly fine, you don't need to be super precise. Well, you might be wondering, what are these two things down there? And it actually has to do something with our loop time. So make sure you deselect everything by clicking anywhere and single click on this loop time. Now, that will select this layer down there, And as you can see, it has a little marker on it that you can move. And that marker actually needs to be positioned precisely on your last keyframe. Why is that? Well, it is because Photomotion needs to know where your animation should stop so it can calculate your seamless loops automatically for you. So we're just going to move this marker and make sure it is aligned with this last keyframe. As you can see, this needs to turn green. So you can see current is now 72. That basically means this marker is on frame 72, 87, blah, blah, blah. So all we need to do is move it precisely to frame 50. And the easiest way to do that is just hold down Shift, and that's just gonna snap to that position just like that. If you do that, this part will turn green. That is telling you everything is perfect. Now we can close this composition and head back to main dashboard. Okay, so now we are back into this main dashboard composition, and as you can see, we have a full new interface here, a lot of new buttons. First, we're gonna focus on this area over there, and this is our resolution blocker section. So what this allows you to do is specify what kind of resolution or aspect ratio of your image you want on your final animation. So for example, we have portrait, we have widescreen, we have square or vertical. Let's single click on portrait, and you enable it inside of your effect controls panel by clicking on this checkbox and selecting activate. If you don't see this panel like this, all you have to do is just go to window, effect controls, and that will enable that panel for you. So single click on this checkbox, and that's gonna enable this resolution blocker. As I said, we have few of them. So this is widescreen, this is square, and this is vertical, which is ideal for phones, let's say for Instagram, as an Instagram story or IGTV. But for this tutorial, we're gonna be sticking with portrait resolution. So let's just click on that. And now let's shift our focus to this area down there. So first button here, let's start from the right side. First button is animation. Single click on it, and as you can see, we have some slider here. This slider allows you to specify how your animation should behave. So if we zoom in on this waterfall that we just animated, if you scrub the timeline, you will see it is actually moving. As you can see, Photomotion already calculated all of those seamless loops for you, so your animation is not 50 frames long as we specified in our animation composition, but it is actually infinitely long because Photomotion calculated those loops for you. You don't need to do it manually. All you have to do here is just preview that animation, and you do that by hitting the spacebar. But before you do, just make sure you drop down this full resolution to something like third, and then move this time head to here. And all you have to do now is just hit spacebar to preview your final animation. Now, the thing I wanted to say about this slider over here, as you can see, we have number 30 here. So what it means is that Photomotion is actually taking 30 frames of your full 50 frame animation to create that seamless loop. So if you put 10 here, so what that would do is that your animation will play until frame 40 here, and then it starts fading like that. I usually recommend setting this to something higher because this way you won't be able to see that fading looping animation. 30 is usually a good starting point. So let's zoom out so we can see other buttons here. We have color. Obviously, this is for adjusting color of your overall image. So we can create this little S-curve just like that to bump these highlights over there, and just make sure these black tones are faded. So we can create this faded look, something like this would do. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Then we have other, obviously, single click on it again. You have faster preview here. This is useful when you're using depth of field, for example, because it will, temporarily disable depth of field so you can preview your animation faster. So here's this depth of field. Well, obviously this is not going to work because you don't have any additional layers, so Photomotion won't know where to focus. If we just put depth of field around this mask, obviously this would look terrible because depth of field doesn't work in that way, but I'll show you how you can use that. Now single click on this photo button here. This gives you full control of that background photo, so we can do mask expansion, if you're seeing any imperfections in your mask. You can even soften edges here, something like that. Took care of that harsh edge that we had there. Plenty of other things. You can do color correction on that specific area. So let's say we want that waterfall to be brighter, like that. Something like this. That looks pretty nice. You can even boost blues, so it's not green as it is now. We can do it here, just like this. It has that bluish tint in it, and you also have a few other things there. But my favorite feature of them all is particles. So single click on this button, and that will allow you to enable particles. Over here, activate particles. Click on that button and that's going to enable those particles in your scene. Now, we have plenty of them. At this point we have 29, but we keep adding new ones as well. So this is particle number 3. You can put particle number 4, let's say. That's a slightly different particle type. And as you can see, your animation is still playing in the background over those particles. So for this video, we're going to be using particle number 19. You'll find all of those previews for all of those particles inside of your Photomotion folder. So now we have these rain particles going on here. You can turn on black and white. Obviously you're not going to see it on this because it's already black and white. You can do some color corrections. For example, you can boost it to something like this if it's not visible enough. As you can see, now these particles are pretty clear. And these other buttons here allow you to specify certain things for specific layers of those particles. So this first button applies to those particles that are closest to the camera, and you can even disable them completely. As you can see down there, you can make them bigger if you want, or smaller. You can change the particle type on that specific particle layer. You can change density, so this is full density. You can decrease it if you find those particles to be distracting on your image. Plenty of other options here. You can change color down there, blah blah blah, all sorts of things. Same thing for all of these other layers. These are actually depth particle layers. So what that means is that this layer is treating particles that are in the middle of your scene. This is further down, and these are distant particles that are further away from the camera. Now, as I said, you can always come back here and change this particle type to something else. I don't know, let's say number 22. Hit enter, and that's going to replace all of those particles with a new particle type. Let's put it back to number 19. And if you want to change any of these particles on these specific depth layers, all you have to do is just click on that and make sure you enable this override master settings checkbox. And that will allow you to specify particle type over here. So you can put, let's say, number 22 here. That's going to change those particles on that specific layer. It won't affect anything else. So if we go to close, do the same thing, enable this, and put 22 here, you'll see that we are basically changing these particles on per layer basis. So let me just quickly reset that back to our default. So something like this. So if you're happy with this animation, you can go ahead and double click on this export button, but I'm going to show you some advanced tools here as well. So let's focus on this person over here and that water that is flowing behind him. So if you look at this animation now, it is only applied to those two waterfalls down there, but we completely skipped this water down here. That comes with a couple of new issues that we need to fix before we can start animating this part of the image. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna create a clean plane. We're gonna put this rock and this person into a separate layer inside of this button down here, and then we're gonna animate that water down there. To be able to do this, we need to tell Photomotion and After Effects what was behind this person when this image was actually shot, because remember, this is a still picture, so there's no way for After Effects to be able to know what was behind that person. So we kind of need to fill in those details before we can start animating that whole water behind him. So let's just go back to Animate Composition and click on Animate, and just make sure we're gonna delete these keyframes, or this one, that's fine, from that Use Puppet tool on this layer, because we're gonna be using Puppet tool on that layer, but we're just gonna delete that Liquify from it. We can close this composition now, head back to Set Mask, and we should mask this area down here. So let's go to draw mask, double click on it, and we need to expand this mask so it includes that water that is behind that person. Single click on it, and we can start drawing a new mask just like this. Again, you don't need to be super precise here. Something like this is completely fine. That's perfect. We can tweak it later, you know. That's fine. That's absolutely fine like this. Because we're gonna put this, the whole rock and the person into separate mask. I'm just gonna add a little bit of feather, hit F on my keyboard, and add something like, I don't know, 15 pixels. That's fine. We can now close this composition, back to this one, close this one as well. Now we are here, and what we need to do now is separate this person and this rock into its own layer. Make sure we are inside of the selection tool, double click on layer number 1, and click import mask. That's fine, and we're gonna import that original image here. So let's just go to project window, drag this photo back down here. And now here's this important thing. You need to click on this, drag it, hold down shift on your keyboard, and just release it on this first layer. So what this is gonna do is that actually it's gonna copy your scaling attribute from your original background image. So you don't need to scale this manually. Of course you can if you want to, but you don't need to do it when you're using this top layer and shift parenting to it. Make sure that layer is selected, and we're gonna mask out that area over there. I'm gonna actually create 2 masks here. Okay, so this is absolutely fine. Now we need to create our second mask, but obviously this is quite tricky because I can't see that person now. So all we need to do is just hit M on our keyboard. That's gonna expand our mask here, and just temporarily we're gonna enable inverted checkbox. So click on that, and now we can create another mask around him. There are many other ways how you can mask these objects. It is a typical masking inside of After Effects, so there are plenty of tutorials. You don't need to use this pen tool, you can use Rotobrush, you can even import your masks from Photoshop. So it's really up to you. I'm just trying to show you how to do these things inside of After Effects. Okay, so this is our mask. We just need to uncheck this checkbox that we checked before, uncheck it, and that's going to put both of these layers into one single layer like this. So we can close this composition now. That brings us back to this add layer 1 dashboard. We can close that one as well. So now that layer is inside of this composition. Now all we need to do is to animate that waterfall and this large area here again. Make sure we go back to this selection tool. Now, one thing to remember is that when something like this layer is obstructing something you are trying to animate, like we are trying to animate this water down here, it is important that you tell After Effects what was behind this layer when this picture was actually shot. And that is done by using something that's called clean plate. Clean plate is just a fancy word for clean background. So we need to create that somehow. It is actually really easy. It is done by using a clone stamp tool. You don't need any special software to do it. We just go back to add photo, double click on it, single click on this layer that we imported. So this is our original image, and we need to create that clean plate here. What that means is just basically we need to remove this person and a little bit of this rock here and replace it with water. Now if you go over here, this is your clone stamp tool, single click on it, now go over there, double click on this, and that will open a new window over here. All you have to do here is just make that brush a little bit smaller because this seems to be too big. Click on this, expand this window a little bit, make this diameter smaller. Something like this. Now all you have to do is just hold down Alt on your keyboard. That's going to show you this different icon. Click somewhere near this person and just start painting like this. And that's going to remove him from the image. Now just remember, you don't need to do this. You only do this when something like our layer number 1 is obstructing something that we're trying to animate, which is this water, obviously. So you don't need to do this for, let's say, 90% of your pictures, but this is just to show you this advanced technique, how this animation should be done. So this is your clean plate, but here's a little tip for you if this happens to you. We created this clean plate on frame number 8. And what that means is that if you go to frame number 7, blah, 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 it also holds that original image there. So all we need to do is click on this, hit U twice, and that's going to open your paint effect. And all you have to do is select all of these effects that you painted with your clone stamp tool. Just make sure you have all of them like that. And you just move them at the beginning of your composition. Something like this. That's it. You can now close this composition and head back to that main dashboard. Just make sure we switch back to this composition window over there. And now we are back here. So as you can see, we painted that clean plate, but this person is still here. And that is because we already imported him inside of that layer number 1. So one thing to remember is I just did that mistake. I double click on this button and that opened a new thing. And that is because I'm still inside of this clone stamp tool. Always make sure you switch back to this selection tool and then double click on this. So as you can see, this person is inside of a separate layer. So that's why he appears on this main dashboard, even though we created that clean plate inside of Add Photo here. So now it's time to animate these 2 waterfalls and this big area of that water. Double click on animate button. And again, single click on this, that's going to select the whole thing. And just make sure you disable this liquify mode, because I just want to show you how you can do this by using Puppet tool. And you disable that liquify mode inside of your effect controls and just click on this checkbox. That's gonna disable it completely, and now we can use our Puppet tool here. So single click on this button over there. This is your Puppet tool. Click on it and make sure your time head is on frame 0, the beginning of your composition, and you can just start adding these buttons here. These are pinpoints. You can add as many of them as you want, but the more you add, the more difficult it is to animate. So be careful with them. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, so these are our Puppet tool points. What we need to do now is just drag this timeline head to frame 50 again. Over here, that is frame 50. And we can start moving these points where we want. So let's say we're gonna move it here, over here. You have fun with this. There are no limits to it. Just try not to overdo it. Now here's a prime example why you should use that clean plate, because as you can see, if we move this too much like this, we would be exposing what was behind that person. So that's why you need that clean plate there. Now if you just scrub this timeline, you will see that animation playing in real time. If you are happy with it, just head back to this main dashboard composition by closing this. Again, make sure you are back into this selection tool, otherwise you will be creating puppets everywhere. And now when you hit spacebar, this is your final animation with those waterfalls moving and that water down there moving as well. Again, this is seamlessly looped for you, so you don't need to do anything else, and your animation is not just 50 frames long, but it is actually infinitely long. At the beginning of the video, I promised you that I'm going to show you a couple of other useful features inside of this, and one of them really useful and hidden inside of Photomotion Mirage is parallax, because now that we imported this first layer, you can also import layer number 2 and layer number 3. Photomotion can actually calculate parallax animation for you automatically, while still keep that animation of this waterfall and this water included in it. So single click on this button here, and let's just enable parallax plus boomerang, and let's see what's gonna happen. Nothing happened except of this parallax plus boomerang label over here. but it actually already happened. So if you scrap this timeline, you'll see that your animation is actually 3D by using this parallax effect. This is something really useful when you just want to create these quick parallax animations combined with things like water movement or sky movement or other organic movements. This is really useful because you don't need to touch anything else. All you have to do is just check that checkbox and we'll calculate everything else for you. Even those particles are in 3D space now. So if you scrap the timeline, you'll see that those that are closer to the camera are moving in a different way than those that are in the back of the image. This is really mind-blowing effect, and it is automatically, seamlessly, again, looped for you. And now as you can see, that camera is moving forward until it hits that frame 50, and then it goes back to its default position like that. And this happens in seamless, continuous loop. Now let's just bump this back to full resolution, go to layer number 2, hit impose mask, just like this, and I don't know, let's just type in something here. Hello. Hit enter, just move it to the middle of the screen, like that. Close it and go back here. And now you can see that text is behind this first layer and it is actually fully animated. If we change these particles to something else, just so that you'll see a different particle type, let's put 22. And as I said, these particles are in 3D space like that. So if you go back to parallax now and use this object distribution slider, that will enable you to kind of expand that 3D effect. Just adding a little bit of movement is usually more than enough to create nice looking photo animations. Now if you go to this button over here, single click on it and use this depth of field slider, that will defocus everything except of that layer, including particles, including everything that is inside of that scene. Obviously not these particles that are closest to the camera because they should be in focus, as well as this layer number 1. Okay, let's just go back here into these particles and change them back to number 19, to our lovely rain, and remove that text from layer number 2. Like that. Close these compositions and just play a little bit with that movement so it's not as prominent as it is now. I don't need that much rotation there. And this in and out, let's say 3.5. Let's see how that's gonna look. Looks pretty good. This is more than enough, we don't need to overdo this. And now it's finally time to render out animation. Double click on this green button down here called export. And this is going to open new composition where you can choose your final resolution. So this is our default one based on what we selected over here. So this is this one, but you can also export different ones. Like let's say you decided to export this for Instagram story. You can come here and export this one without the need to do the whole setup and the whole animation again. But for this video, we're just going to be exporting this one. So double click on that. And this is the final composition that you should render out. But before we do that, let's just have a look on this section down here, because this section is really important. It's called Photomotion Perfect Cut System. Photomotion Perfect Cut System is actually calculating all of those seamless loops and giving you a little cues where you should make your cut in your animation so that your animation is perfectly seamlessly looped. So it is telling us that we should make cut either of frame number 100 or frame number 200, 300, 400, blah, blah. So this is basically loop number 1, loop number 2, loop number 3. So let's just go to frame 100 and see what's going to happen. You go to that specific frame by going over here and just make sure this is enabled. This is frame display. If you don't see it, you probably see something like this. All you have to do, hold down Control and single click on it. That's going to switch back to frames, and just type 100. Give it a second, and Photomotion is already telling you, yes, this is exactly where you should make that cut to get your one loop. So if you just move this to something else, it obviously fades away. So let's just go back to frame 100. And all you need to do here is just tell After Effects to stop rendering on this specific frame. And you do that by grabbing this thing over here and just dragging it over there. It is quite tricky to align it, but if you hold down Shift, it's gonna snap to that time head, just like that. Or if you hit N on your keyboard, that's gonna do it for you. That's a keyboard shortcut for setting out that out point. Now you are ready to render out this animation, but there are two more buttons here. First one, settings, single click on it, again because it's gray. You have a couple of options here. You can hide these controls completely like that, or you can add a little bit of lens distortion, something like this, a little bit of vignetting. That looks pretty nice. Offset, scale, blah blah blah. But the other button is actually more important because it gives you full access to our own library of effects. So just double click on it because it's blue, and that's going to open a new composition with all of those assets that you can import into your animation. So for example, let's say we want to add a little bit of light leaks. So we double click on this. That's going to open this panel where you can see all of those light leaks that you can choose from. For this specific animation, I don't know, let's say this looks pretty good. So single click on it and go to Edit, Copy, or shortcut is obviously Control C. Head back to this render portrait composition and paste it here, or just go to Edit, Paste, shortcut is Control V, just like that. And now if you preview your animation, you'll see that light leak is already there. You can move it like this. That looks pretty good. This specific light leak is probably a little bit too strong for this animation, so we can go over here to opacity and decrease it to, I don't know, something like this, so it's just barely visible. Now your light leaks are also seamlessly looped, so there's not going to be any cut in them, but one thing you need to pay attention to is this fade out marker on that light leak. You should always move it to the end of your animation because that light leak will play in continuous loop until it hits that fade out marker, and then it just fades out and starts from the beginning again, just like this. Well, obviously you can add more of these effects into your animations, and to do that we just need to go back to our effects, but we can't click on it because this layer is actually blocking our buttons. So what we need to do here is, as it says here, we need to move this layer down here like this, and that's going to unblock these buttons here. If you still can't click on them, just make sure you deselect that layer by clicking somewhere here, and then you will be able to double click on this blue button again, just like that. And let's add a little bit of particles. These particles are moving particles, so you can see that they are not static as our particles that we have in our animation now. I quite like these over here. These are really subtle. So click on it, Control Copy, back to this render portrait and paste them here like this. Move them somewhere over here. Again, this fade out marker, we just move it somewhere at the end. That's fine like that. And then we're gonna move it below that layer here. And if you play this animation now, you'll see both of these effects applied at the same time. And all we have to do now is to export this animation out of After Effects, and you do that by going over to File, Export, and add to render queue. Obviously, if you are familiar with Adobe Media Encoder, you can use this option that will allow you to export, let's say, MP4 files. But for this tutorial, we're going to be sticking with add to render queue. So single click on that. That's going to open a new tab. It's next to your composition down here. It's called render queue. And all you have to do here is click on this lossless word that will allow you to specify a specific codec. I usually render out QuickTime movies like that and choose Cineform here. Quality 4 is fine. We don't need any audio for this file, so we can just set audio output off like that. Hit OK, and then just specify your final output path. Okay, I'm gonna put it onto desktop, hit save, and before you hit that render button, just save this whole project somewhere else so you don't overwrite your original one. Save as, and save it as new animation. Hit enter, this is gonna save your project. And depending on your computer power, this can take anything between a few seconds and a few minutes. So now you know how to create seamlessly looped organic movement in your photo animations. We also have more videos about different aspects of photo animation, such as this cool tutorial for creating parallax effect. If you are into this topic, make sure you have a look. Also, if you like this video, you want to see more, let us know by subscribing to our channel or giving us your like. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I'm gonna go back to do a few more of these for our social media, but I'm sure I'll see you in the next video.